Hey, this is Dorian Day, and welcome to Serum Superiority number 2. Today we're going to be revisiting the last time's topic, subfundamental aliasing and non-harmonic distortion. I have some more information on the topic. We're going to be going over all of the user comments, or not user comments, viewer comments. Put this on a couple forums, and then some comments from YouTube. Had some advice on what's going on, ways to improve the test. Then after that, I'm going to run another test with more synthesizers. So let's go over some of the comments. So I posted on Gear Sluts, a pretty important forum in electronic gear and music production in general, everything to do with music. And user is a veteran of the Gear Sluts forums. And he had to say, add Harmer to the list, which I did. And then he said, my wild guess would be that Serum is additive and does internal resampling. I read in the manual, and I don't see anything saying that it's additive. It says that it's a wavetable synth. I'm a little curious how this works also because there's an additive portion inside of Serum. I haven't had a chance to ask Steve Dudo what's going on, but I suspect that it is an additive engine that then creates a sample that Serum uses. And then he also says the bias thing is also something I'd like to see explained. Me too. I don't have any more information on that, unfortunately. Food Eater had to say it's neat, I guess, but does it really matter? I don't know. That's why I'm kind of doing this, is to try and think about whether or not this does matter. I have an opinion on whether or not it matters, but I'm going to save it for the end of the video. Sticky fingers. Why not check with higher frequency? That would be more likely to have aliasing. So I did. I did two C3, C5, and C7. So we'll be going over that. Hurst Programmer. So here was a technical response I was really happy to get. So he has to say a small amount of noise distortion down there is not really a problem. I developed a very refined oscillator models from my Transitao synthesizer, and I can go from almost perfect to totally dirty quality. With highest quality settings, there's just a small amount of calculation noise below negative 138 decibels, nothing else. Things can and should be very different when you start to process the oscillators through various shapers, modulators, and filters. I also developed thermal noise drift emulation, so all the oscillators and filters are independently floating around in time. Then he has to say the high end on silence looks pretty bad because of aliasing distortion, much more noticeable in the high frequencies. The inharmonic components in strobe don't look good. That shouldn't be there. That was my thought too. And then he says the same with Synthmaster. Spire Lushen UHG synths, he says, do it properly. So we're going to have to take a look at that. Massive has some high-end aliasing as well. Doesn't look very nice to me. DC offset, that's where all of the phase was shifted, either positive or negative. Phase, is that right? I'm not exactly sure how to say that, but it's when the waveform is shifted up or down from center on the zero phase line. Then he says DC offset, as in the case of Spire, could be just a product of the synthesis algorithms. He has DC blockers. Okay. That does that. Now, dubstep forums. So, No Way SJ, he was basically responding to something I said, and his response was, what is the technical level? Like, how could you that matter in a way that doesn't manifest in the aesthetic? There is no technical independent of the aesthetic. So it basically just seemed like it didn't really matter to him, these investigations, as long as the end result sounded good. But he was the only person to respond, so I appreciated that nonetheless. His opinion is to test matters by producing a song. I think that's it complicates the matter somewhat. And once again, I'll save my opinion on that for the end. So let's just keep going over the comments. KVR, I'd guess, are we not seeing the differences between analog modeling and purely digital synthesis? I'm not 100% sure on this yet. it's hard to know 100% whether a synth is entirely digital or analog. Even inside of the manuals, they don't always specify all of that information. And then he goes on to say, looking at Zebra, which I think uses a similar approach to Serum, we see a relative lack of harmonic distortion, but Diva, which is modeled on analog synths, creates a lot of non-harmonic distortion, which is what I guess is giving its oscillators character. Neither good nor bad, just different. Perhaps. I found, well, we'll see. I found some other synthesizers that have pretty good results in comparison to Serum, so we'll look at that later. Bit Crusher, who's a familiar and important person if you go check out KBR. The correct term is aliasing, Nyquist reflections. So I suppose everything that I was saying, sub-fundamental aliasing, non-harmonic distortions, all of that noise and junk is aliasing and Nyquist reflections. And there's some information if you go to this web address right here. What is aliasing? It's easiest to describe aliasing in terms of visual sampling a system we all know and love in movies. If you've ever watched a Western and seen the wheel of a rolling wagon appear to be going backwards, you've witnessed aliasing. It's basically limitations in the ability of a digital system to sample or record a continuous signal. And I'm going to go through some pictures right now. This is of Thirst Programmer's synthesizer that I was reading about in the comments earlier. This is his clean synthesizer. You can see there's not a lot, if any, distortion, very similar to how Serum was. And if we go one picture up, this is the addition of his distortion, his dirtiness. We're going to look at aliasing. So aliasing is pretty much, or exactly, when you have frequencies that go past the sampling rate, to put it simply. And when that happens, they reflect backwards. So you see these blue frequencies that go past the Nyquist limit, they reflect back as these little red frequencies, and they're non-harmonic and they're distortion. And you can see another graph of it. This is from the awesome wave candy inside of Fruity Loops. So here on the left is a perfect non-aliased oscillator or saw wave, and on the right we have an aliased one. You see all the distortion and non-integer harmonics right here. And how do we get rid of these? Well, we have filters inside of our synthesizers and digital effects that go past our sampling rate and filter out this junk. At least that's one way of doing it. So the high end is usually more of a problem because the aliasing is louder there, but often are usually masked, often at least somewhat, by louder intended frequencies, so often you don't perceive them. With that said, you can very often hear the clarity difference when they are removed. The more important thing watching your video briefly is indeed the high end, both if there are reflections and what level, and if also the frequency response is indeed flat to 20,000 hertz. Many synths will band limit to minimize the amount of Nyquist reflections. Bimerzicki said to watch Monty's excellent video on digital media.
Reason, analog signal technology must have time dimension of audio.
Talks in technical detail about digital media in general, sampling and audio and video. Digital noise makers, oscillators, filters, effects have to combat aliasing with special filters, so we just showed that image. It's important to note that once digital aliasing makes it into the audible spectrum of your signal, there is no way to easily remove it. You can't high pass or low pass the signal to remove all of it without also removing some of the desired signal. That's why it's so important to get it gone in the first place. From Fred Abstract. Do you use oversampling on strobe at max? I did not in that video. In the previous video, I was not paying attention to oversampling. So in this video, I have every synthesizer that has oversampling set to its maximum oversampling setting, and it's written in the track title up here what is the setting, what setting it's on. Tony Chopper says, I'm looking at the wrong scale. 96 decibels, which is the bit or the dynamic range of a 16-bit audio file, is already not in the realm of audible anymore. And then he also goes on to say that the bulges are imprecisions in the spectrograph. There's no way to improve spectrogram precision, and thus better out there for this purpose. There are ways to. So perhaps I don't know what to think about that in general. Why did these show up on some synthesizers and not others? What is going on there? I'd really love an answer to that in general, since some synthesizers, not just Serum, as I've discovered, are clean. And Strobe had that really weird looking bump if you go back to the last video. Next, he has to say you're going to get the purest sawtooth out of an additive synthesizer. So, and that's why I added them to the test today. And then he shows an image that we have here. This is the aliasing image, going back to it. Clean versus dirty. Okay. Finally, from Iganator, who works at Waldorf, I believe. I saw in his tag line. He says, concerning alias, lots of words about the synthesizer. Basically, that the Waldorf puts into emulation aliasing. The emulation is done to replicate the character of the original synth, which is, in this specific case, many people seem to prefer over 100% clean sound. This does not mean I generally like aliasing. In a good analog emulation, I prefer to have aliasing-free oscillators too. YouTube, Capiao. Aliasing is definitely a bad thing. The original 8080 Super Saw was also aliased, though, which gave it that noisy extra. But it's better to have your oscillators as clean as possible, and you can always add the effects of aliasing later if you really want it. Better to add just a bit of white noise, in my honest opinion. This is sort of my thinking in the matter, but I'll go into that in more detail at the end. Dan Yuin, hey, can you do one for Zeta? Yes, I added Zeta. And Viral Alankar, I noticed you have warp mode on. Does it mess with the waveforms in any way? No, it does not. It doesn't mess with the waveforms because as long as you haven't changed the BPM in Ableton from the original sample BPM, even if the warp mode is engaged, it has no impact on the audio. So that does it for the comments. Now we're going to go into the test portion. All right, so I'm going to try and make this overall pretty quickly. If you want more information about what we're looking for, you need to go to the last video and see the analysis there, because this is just a quick re-overview of that information. So starting with D16 Lush on high quality. At C3, you can see the bumps below and the noise above. Right here, this is the aliasing, or analog character, or what have you, I guess. But 2 octaves higher, even more noise aliasing. And once again, at 2 octaves above that, more aliasing. But at a level that's below 96 decibels, which who was it? Man, well, which someone said is below the audible level. So let's check out Fabfilter. Noise, lots of it. Same weird bump down here. This one above 96. Some of the aliasing is above 96 decibels. Yeah, lots of weird stuff. Okay, strobe. And now strobe is on 8 times oversampling. And here's that. This is the interharmonic that one of the commenters said is an imprecision in the FFT. but I don't know. I can't get it to go away. I guess you need an analog one or an expensive one. There they are again. As you go up in octaves, the distortion and noise is lower. There we go. Silent, no oversampling, noise, distortion in between. More, same. Same. Reveal spire. Bunch of junk, lots of bouncing, but according to one of the commenters, it has a really good high end. I mean, you can see it's pretty flat, so even though there's noise here, it seems to be doing its best. Compared to Silent, not really orderly or smooth. Strobe seems pretty good. So up in Spire, an octave. Still junk and noise, some of it above 96 decibels. Same. Okay, UHG Ace. At accurate. Some. But done well, as pointed out by one of the commenters. Noise, none of it above 96 decibels. Pretty controlled and organized, but stuff down there. Diva on divine setting. Good high end, some noise reflected down. Stuff down here, nothing over 96. Similar to Ace with less peaks. See? Ow. Okay, so that's all of the virtual analog synthesizers. Now onto the wave shapers. Zeta. Noise. But pretty good high end. Is there something? It's an octave too low. Noise. Same. Spikes, not very orderly in general. Not like Diva was. Very clean and smooth looking. Zebra. Yeah, there's some stuff going on. I can't really comment on the high end. Noise, but way low, below 96. Pretty clean overall, very low. Okay, on to FM synths, FM8. Noise, weird, high end, but that's, I mean, I'm not sure this is a pure saw wave inside of FM8. Yeah, this is probably aliasing. I don't think FM8 has a quality setting. Yeah, I don't know. Ableton's operator. Some noise, dipping. Interesting high end. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Pretty good on the low end though. Some peaks. Overall pretty good though, I think. And yeah, I suppose that's, you know, the difference between digital FM and some of these other more analog based systems. All right, here we are at Serum. Perfectly clean. And the cause of this investigation. Perfectly clean. The beginning of some noise at the lowest points we've seen. Yeah, there you go. Vibra audio surge. Pretty clean. Another wavetable synthesizer. Not as good as Serum in its low end. It starts getting some of the noise earlier. But has a much lower bottom tail. And there you go. Massive. Pretty dirty and weird high end. Same. Same. All right, KV3 synth master. Lots of junk. Sort of orderly junk, but junk. Junk still. Junk still. Okay, go ahead and get rid of that sound. Okay, so these are most of the synthesizers. I have image line synths in here, but they were crashing the project, so I put them into a separate one. Here's Morphine, an additive synthesizer by image line. Extremely clean, but still a little wobbly as compared to Serum. Right? No, sorry. No, yeah, Morphine was the cleanest compared to anything. Except for Serum. They're on par. I mean, I would have to give them, I guess, a look next to each other. Higher, still extremely clean. And yeah, very clean. Perhaps cleaner than Serum. Harmer. Pretty darn clean. Some junk in the low end. Some stuff right here popping in. And it's on 64 times oversampling. Sorry, this is Citrus. This isn't Harmer. This is Citrus. An FM synth. Pretty clean. Not quite as clean as Morphine or Serum, but pretty clean. Now here's Harmer. On perfect and high precision. I originally did a test on Harmer and I didn't use the high precision settings and there was much more junk, but right here this is basically perfectly clean. Perfectly clean. Some stuff, but pretty clean. And Toxic Biohazard. So-so. Not going to go through the rest. So we've seen that in terms of cleanliness, Harmer, Citrus, Morphine, Vimber Surge, and Serum are the cleanest. Serum and Morphine seem to be the cleanest of the clean. But what's that mean? Well, I'm still not 100% sure. Obviously, we've had a lot of people chime in on what this is and if it's important. I tend to think it's important for the reason that someone said down here, which is it's better to have your oscillators as clean as possible, and you can always add these effects later. You can add noise, you can add analog emulated tape, saturators, amps, anything. If you put an amp, especially a digital amp, like a plug-in amp on your synthesizers, it's going to add harmonics. Now, people or someone said above, like, oh, at 96 decibels, this isn't audible. Well, if you run it through an amp, you're going, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to amplify those non-harmonic alias frequencies that are in between your sound, and it's going to have an impact. You're going to add something that perhaps you didn't intend to, or that is not predictable. I have a fascination with predictability, so this is a curiosity to me, how to separate the parts of your design as much as possible. Separate, your oscillator sound from the warmth or character or anything else. I know that there's some backwards thinking in that, because when you're designing a synthesizer, there's things you do internally that you couldn't necessarily replicate with plugins and effects. So it's a hard balance. I'm sure there's definitely value in synthesizers with this warmth or noise, like Diva and Silent and the ones we've checked out today. I suppose this is just intended to make you think about what's going on. I haven't. People talk about the differences in synthesizers. People say, oh, there is no difference. They all do the same thing. Or, there's a drastic difference. One sounds warm and this sounds this way. But it's very unscientific and speculative. And it'd be nice to try and have some kind of assessment that we could at least use facts when we make these discussions. If you find a preference in Silent, perhaps you find out it's like you like that aliasing, not the aliasing that you could add to some other synthesizer, the aliasing in Silent, or its filter saturation or something. And that's where the value comes in. But it's nice to know what each thing is doing and how it works. So hopefully that sheds some light on something. If you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know. This is of particular interest to me, and there's limited conversation and thought and talk on the matter, or at least I don't know where to find it, so please help direct me. All right, bye.